Prices keep going up, and even though it may seem like there's no way to keep even or get ahead, you are not stuck.
We often think that making more money is the magic key to not running out of money at the end of the month.
But what if the money to reach your financial goals actually already exists in your current budget? A few years ago, Larry and I invented this activity called the 10% challenge. We often use it in order to cut back our expenses so we can save more money.
What's really fun about this particular activity is that it will only take you about 20 minutes to actually work through it once you have it set up.
We're going to give you specific examples of the 10% challenge in this video, but first, if you don't know us, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
This is Under the Median, where every week we talk about practical frugality.
The idea behind the 10% challenge is to show you that you're not locked in stone to your budget. There's always some ways to wiggle around in some of the categories and make money go a little further than you thought it could.
The 10% challenge was actually born out of experience in our life where we needed to save money really quickly toward a huge financial goal of paying cash for our current home. Now, Larry asked me to get out our budget in order to cut it back, and I replied and said, there's not a lot of room there
Not much room
to cut.
But I convinced her that we can cut just a little bit off in each category and come up with a total of 10% that we could take off, that we could use toward our savings plan.
Much to our surprise, when we cut a little bit off each area of our budget, we wound up with a lot more than 10%, several $100s a month that we could put ultimately toward our great big financial goal.
But how does this challenge actually work? There's two different strategies that you can use. You can take 10% off of your total budget, or you can take 10% off of specific categories within your budget.
Now, if you're taking 10% off of your budget and you choose 10 budget categories, that of course means you only need to cut back 10 budget categories by 1% to reach that overall savings goal of 10% of your entire budget. Generally, Larry and I have found it much easier to work with individual budget categories. Usually we pick 2 or 3 categories that we're working on at the same time in order to cut those down an average of 10% per budget category.
It's much easier to track and work with 2 or 3 budget categories than 10. So that way you can keep a little bit more on top of it.
So your first step is to decide the focus. Are you going to work on 10% of your entire budget or 10% of specific budget categories? Then you're going to take a look at the budget categories that you have selected and determine how you're already spending money in those budget categories. In our example, we just completed the 10% challenge about 20 minutes before we decided to go on camera and share this with you. And we selected our winter utility bills to try to cut back on. Now, throughout this video, we'll give you some tips and strategies on how to find that 10% in your budget. And we'll be using specific examples of the ways that we're going to cut back on our utility bills.
One of the things that Hope brought up just now brings out a key point, and that's you have to have a place to go with your savings. You want a goal in mind as to what you want this extra money for, and that will help you keep on top of it and keep working at it.
Because if I'm just saving money for the sake of saving money, that's completely different than saving money in order to pay off a credit card, or in order to pay off my home, or in order to pay off my car loan, or in order to save for that family vacation next summer. Once you put a specific action with that goal that says this is where the money is going, it makes it much more likely that you're going to stick with that 10% that you're trying to shave off of your budget categories.
The goal of the challenge isn't to implement change, it's to get some ideas, to gather some ideas of how you're going to work at it. So you're going to sit down and you're going to brainstorm some ideas in mind of how you're going to reach these goals.
Now, we mentioned that this entire challenge would take 20 minutes, but first you have to set up your challenge. So we use a worksheet to do that, and it's ironically called the 10% challenge worksheet. We'll show you this worksheet as we go through and exactly what we decided to do in order to lower our winter utility bills. The first thing you're going to do is put the budget category at the top. For us, it's our energy bills for winter 2024-25. But you have to supply exact dates. How long is this challenge going to be? Is it going to be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? For us, this is a 90-day challenge. We'll start December 1st and we'll end on February 28th. Next, how often are you going to review how you're doing on this challenge? Every 30 days for us, we're coming right back to this. We're going to look at our list of brainstormed ideas, determine how well we've implemented those ideas, and then figure out what is next for the next 30 days after that. So we'll actually come back to this planning sheet 3 times during the midst of this 90-day challenge.
Whenever you make a challenge, you want to consider all the possible variables that might come up. Now, in terms of our winter bills, we're picking December 1st through February 28th because those are the coldest times and the highest amounts of utilities that we'll pay all year. But December, because it's not as cold, we're not going to have as high a bills in December as we are in January. February can also be just about as cold as January. So we expect January and February to be higher than December. So we're taking that into consideration as we implement these changes.
But how do you come up with specific numbers? Because goals are all about specifics, right? This is where the data gathering comes in. You have to figure out what you're already spending on this area of your budget. For us, that was pretty easy to go back 12 months ago, pull all of those utility bill amounts from last December, January, and February, and then figure out what the average of those 3 bills was. The average was a little over $195 per month. Now, for sake of rounding up, which is so much easier to do math, I like easy math, I rounded it up to $200 a month. 10% of that means overall reducing those 3 utility bills by $20 for each bill. But as Larry mentioned, December is not nearly as cold generally here as January and February. So we are going to double down in December. We're going to lower that December bill as low as we can so we have a little bit more wiggle room with that January and February bill in order to still average $195, or I guess in this case, $180 per month for those 3 bills.
And of course, we know that the costs have gone up slightly since last year too, so we have to take that into consideration. And as you consider your 10% challenge for whatever you're going to do it for, you have to look at what possibly has changed in a year.
And that's where it really helps to know your overall average. I went back last year and averaged all of our utility bills for 2023. It was a little over $139 a month for all 12 months averaged together. Then I averaged the first 11 months of 2024 because those bills are already paid. It averaged about $144 a month. So overall, even though utility costs have risen significantly, we've only paid an average of about $5 more per month per utility bill.
So we have this whole top part of the worksheet filled out, and you can see it there on your screen. Now we're going to set the timer for 20 minutes, and we're going to actually go through the exercise of brainstorming the ideas that's going to make this happen.
20 minutes. Where are you going to find ideas for saving in specific areas of your budget in 20 minutes? We're going to give you some broad ideas, and then you can sort of take those ideas and adapt them to your particular situation or area of the country. Community resources. We have community resources here in our area that specifically deal with people who are older, for senior citizens, and it also specifically deals with those who generally live below or at the poverty line. Those organizations have lots of facts and information. They know about community programs that are available to help pay those utility bills throughout the winter. Now is the time, if you are in a lower income bracket, you want to make sure that you get in that line and find out when those programs are going to open, because the amount of money to fund those programs is limited. So once the money is gone, it's gone. So you need to make sure that every year you are planning ahead. But let's just say you're not going to take advantage of those community programs. Those community organizations can still be priceless for you because they have all the information that you need to help lower those utility bills.
There's a lot of good online forums like Facebook groups where different individuals will tell you what they've done to lower their utility bills. And if you just make a list of all those, and that's basically what Hope did. Hope came up with 60 items on a list of how to lower your utility bills. When we went through all of these suggestions, that's when we came up with this that we could go over and we could talk over and pick out which ones would apply mostly to our home and our situation that we could implement.
This checklist of 60 different ways that you can lower your winter utility bills, this is part of an ebook which I wrote that goes along with our home energy savings bundle. I have 60 ideas for winter and 60 ideas for summer. If you're interested in getting a copy of this checklist, I'm going to make sure that there's a link in the description of this video to the home energy savings bundle.
There are a number of YouTube videos that also go through this subject matter that'll help you get ideas, and you can always Google it and come up with some. So no matter what category you're going to save in, you can find a lot of information for it online.
So you're Googling ideas specifically based around the area that you are trying to lower in your budget. One of the things that's really helpful, and you'll see on this checklist, I'll make sure that we do a nice slow pan so you can see all of the ways that we are planning to save on our winter utility bills. But one of the things that you might notice about the list is I do try to group some things together. For instance, the first 3 things on my list all have to do with our windows. How do we get our windows ready for winter? One of the things we really start to take notice of right now is the fact that it can be really warm in the daytime. We open the windows, and then when we shut them at night, they don't get shoved all the way up at the top, so you have that crack where cold air is coming in. That goes on our list, our brainstorming list, to make certain that we're doing everything that we can right now when the weather's starting to turn to get ready for those winter utility bills.
So we have 3 tips that just talk about the windows and the cold air that could possibly come into your home through them. This list that Hope mentioned, there's actually, as she said, 60 items on here. We went through and we decided which ones would be most applicable to our home. And we came up with 23 items that we're going to really work hard at for the months of December, January, and February. And we're going to start right now, even though it's not December yet, to get going on them. This will keep us busy, and we hope by the end of February we have these averages down to the amount that we set here, the $180.
The advantage of the 10% challenge is that you can check periodically to see, here was my list of ideas. How many of those have I implemented? What has been the effect on my utility bills?
Yeah.
We can tell with our utility company, they let us see down to every 15-minute increment exactly how much energy we have used on any given day, any given hour, any given 15 minutes. So we get a lot of data from our utility company. But if you don't get a lot of data, how can you figure out whether what you are doing is being effective? And how often are you going to check back in with this 10% challenge list and either come up with new ideas, roll over the ones that you've tried that you're like, ooh, shoot, that's working super duper well. We're going to do that again. Which ones are you going to rinse and repeat? Which ones are you just decided this is not for us? We're not going to be able to do it. And which ones are you going to add that are new ideas? The wonderful thing about frugality is the fact that we've been frugal for over 30 years now, and we have never yet run out of new ideas.
Right.
By doing the 10% challenge, it proves to you that you are not stuck.
Remember that the undergirding underneath the 10% challenge is all the mini steps that you're going to take in order to get there. And remember, this is so true about frugality in general. From what we've discovered, it's the multitude of small changes add up to the big change.
We've been talking about how we're going to change our behavior in order to lower our winter utility bills. But let's just say another common area would be groceries.
Yes.
Lowering a grocery bill is probably the number one question that we get here on this channel. The thing about grocery bills is exactly the same. The process for the 10% challenge that we just described to you, It's exactly the same as what we described for your utility bill. The process doesn't change. The only thing that changes is that part of their budget that you are trying to lower. But if you are trying to lower your grocery bills, we just did a video on ways that you can save on every single meal of the day. Lots of examples, recipes, photos of what we've done. The video is right over there.